Yes, hello again. Welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV and to the 2025 charity scramble event held here at Craigantlet in Northern Ireland. Yes, hello once again. Welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV. And as you can see, we're out and about in the fresh air once again. And today we've made the journey from the UK mainland across the Irish Sea to cover this two-day charity scramble event that's being held here at Cecil Pearson's hillside racetrack at Craigantlet. Now, as we said, this is a charity event, so the Northern Ireland Classic Scramble Club usually pick a charity or two charities to receive any monies that are taken in over the course of the weekend, and this year's charity is the Northern Ireland Air Ambulance, so any monies received with regards entries and donations at the gate will be held and given to the Northern Ireland Air Ambulance, another very worthwhile organisation. Now, this track here at Cecil Pearson's is a nice natural hillside racetrack, as you can see. No fancy massive jumps or berms or anything like that, just we're using the natural undulations of this hillside racetrack to hold this charity event. Now again, it is a two-day event. We have two blocks of racing on the Friday evening, and then we'll have a full 3 blocks of racing on the Saturday. So there's quite a lot to get through between now and Saturday. But before we get down to seeing any bikes racing on the track, we of course have to have a quick look at some of the bikes that are soon to take part in this two-day event. So let's head down to the paddock and take our first look at some of the bikes that are soon to take part in the Friday evening's Classic Scramble. Right, so we're going to kick off our 2025 charity scramble paddock walkabout by taking a look at a nice trio of classic scramblers belonging to Philip McKee, and we're going to start by checking out this rare, probably 1960s, early 70s Wasp Triumph 350 Twin, a bike that you certainly don't normally associate with Wasp motorcycles, because they were quite well known for building those fantastic three-wheeled grass track and scrambles outfits, although they certainly did build a few of these classic scrambles two-wheelers as well. Anyhow, back in the day, Wasp would certainly build you a frame kit to suit the chosen engine that you wanted to put inside the chassis, and it was much the same arrangement as the Rickman chassis of that period, where you'd simply buy the frame, the swing arm, the tank, the seat and the body panels, and then you would simply add your own front and rear suspension and all the other parts that went into completing your particular bike. And in the case here with Philip's bike, he's slotted in a Triumph Twin 350, which again was a very popular power plant for scrambling at that time. Now, I'm certainly no expert on these 350 twins, but I'm pretty sure that these 350s were around about the same time that Triumph introduced their first unit construction engine, whereby the gearbox was an internal part of the engine. And if I'm not mistaken, this is much the same motor that was also fitted into the Triumph 21 road bike about 1967, which, as I remember, was just a cast type construction with an alloy overhead valve cylinder head that also had a dry sump lubrication system with just a small twin plunger type oil pump. Now the clutch was driven, as I remember, by a duplex primary chain, and I think the gearbox was just a simple 4-speeder. So as we move on to the front end of Phillips Wasp Triumph, I'm pretty sure that this is a pair of Italian Serianis that's been bolted on here at the front end, which, as I've said many times in the past, were a popular fitment to many of these vintage scramblers of the period, usually because these Serianis were a slightly better option than some of the British forks that were available at the time. But surprisingly though, Phillips got an 18-inch wheel here on the front, as opposed to what would have been the standard 21-inch rim normally. And the chosen hub and front brake on Phillips' bike is one of those matchless hubs, which again were a very popular fitment on many British classics of the 1960s. And also here at the back, it's another British-made QD BSA rear hub, or quick detach to give it its real name, which basically meant that you could remove the rear wheel from the swing arm and still leave the chain and the sprocket and hub attached. Also for that 1960s period, the bike's fuel tank and side panels would have probably been made of fiberglass, as most body panels would have been at that time, because these were relatively cheap to manufacture and super light as well. And Phillips Wasp appears to continue to sport its original 1960s handlebars and controls, although that little engine kill switch there on the left is a more modern fitment, but nevertheless a decent addition to help protect that Triumph motor from any damage. But this is certainly not a bike that you see every single day, and it is quite rare to see one here at a Classic Scramble, because, as I said earlier, Robin Rintutt, who started Wasp motorcycles all those years ago, were building mainly motocross sidecar outfits, and these solo two-wheelers were a sort of secondary sideline for the Wasp company. But it's still great to see one here again in the flesh in Northern Ireland. Anyhow, so this next bike of Phillips was another quite impressive looking tool, and this is his Wasp framed Westlake twin cam four-stroker, another rare and absolutely gorgeous piece of machinery. Now, I don't know if this is a 500, a 600, or even a bigger engine than that, because there was nobody on site when I grabbed these video clips. But looking at that massive lump of an engine, it might even be a lot bigger than a 600, but nevertheless he's still managed to shoehorn this massive engine into one of Rintutt Wasp's chassis, which again is another work of art by the late Robin Rintutt, who of course in his early years was an engineer employed by the Ministry of Defence at Boscombe Down, which essentially then gave Robin the skills he needed to produce these fantastic frames. So when it comes to these Westlake engines, don't expect me to furnish you with all of the history and the intricate details of this superb engine, because I was never actually given any details on the day, and Philip, as I said, wasn't around when I grabbed these clips. But I do know that Westlake's research and developments company was founded by the great Harry Westlake, who predominantly was England's greatest expert when it came to cylinder head designs. Not only on motorcycles, but many of the top branded cars of their day as well, including the likes of Bentley and Jaguar and the quite awesome Ford GT40 Mark I as well. Although the Westlake story is just far too intricate and involved to go into any detail in this very short video, but if you do get the chance, then certainly check out its past history, which I'm sure you'll all find very interesting. However, Harry Westlake certainly did go on to design some iconic four-stroke motorcycle engines that were put to good use as speedway power plants, and who knows, this twin cam monster here might even be a derivative of some of those older Westlake engines, which it has to be said did have some major successes on those short oval shale racetracks. But as you can see, the Westlake engine here is a pre-unit construction with a separate gearbox that looks like it could be another one of those Norton AMC 4-speed units, and the engine looks like it's got a total loss oil lubrication system as well, using that little oil pump there on the end of the crankshaft. But I can only imagine what this motor will sound like when it gets all fired up, and I'm guessing that it runs on methanol and not regular gas, which is usually what most of these Westlakes ran on way back in the day. Now, at the front end of our Philip McKee Westlake, I'm pretty sure it's another pair of Seriani forks, but here at the back it's a quite decent pair of those super popular YSS classic suspension units, which are basically modern suspension units that are specifically made to suit these older classic bikes. But these will be a lot better than the shocks that this bike originally had way back in the 1960s. So as we make our way on to the fuel tank on this bike, which I'm guessing is an alloy part this time round, and not the same kind of fiberglass as we had in our previous Triumph Wasp. And some of the other parts on this bike, like the seat, is a pretty much stock standard item that more than likely all came with the frame kit when Philip first bought it. However, this is maybe another bike that we may revisit at a later date when more background and information are obtained, because it's certainly an interesting machine, and one of the first Rin-Tut Wasps that I've seen with one of these big twin cam four-stroke Westlake engines sitting inside that beautiful Wasp chassis. Right, so just to finish off our browse around Philip McKee's trio of racing classics, this final example here is his Rickman framed Godden GR500, another superb specimen of British engineering. And unlike our previous two Wasp chassis, this example here is using a Rickman framed kit, and Phillips slotted in another speedway powered classic four-stroke motor that was designed and built by the legendary Don Godden, who at one time I think was a highly successful long track and grass track racer, and I think he actually won the long track world championships way back in 1969. And it was sometime later in the early 1970s that Don Godden set up his own engineering company, designing and building motorcycle frames before he went on to manufacture his own engines. And these GR500s were among some of Don's most successful, especially being used as a grass track or speedway power plant. And from some of the information I managed to gather on these engines, this GR500 was a single overhead cam motor that had a 4-valve cylinder head, and it's also said that on a good day one of these Godden engines could pump out around the 65 horsepower mark, which wasn't too shabby for a 4-stroke single. And it was also a pre-unit construction motor again, and used that well-proven Norton AMC 4-speed gearbox as its transmission, because these AMC boxes were well built and rugged and certainly reliable, which is probably why they were put to good use on a multitude of different British-made motorcycles. And it was the combination of the AMC transmission and this absolutely awesome Godden engine that made this marriage a lethal combination on the racetrack. And I suppose if you're a speedway or grass track racer, then you'll certainly know a lot more about these Godden GR500s than I do. Anyhow, as we make our way on to the clutch side of our GR500, now I think it was your usual oil-cooled wet multi-plate affair on this engine, although I expect that maybe nowadays you'll be able to get yourself maybe a dry belt upgrade of some sort, but certainly Philip looks like he's still got the original oil-cooled clutch here on his particular GR. And as we take a look here at the front of our Godden 500, it's once again those tried and tested Italian Seriani forks, quite similar to the ones that were bolted on to our Triumph Wasp. And these forks again are using those alloy matchless brakes and hubs, which as I said were quite common to fit to a variety of off-road scramblers of the 1960s and 70s. But this time round we've got the traditional Rickman alloy fuel tank that usually was part of the frame kit, which is much the same as the kit that would have been supplied by Wasp motorcycles. So there you go, another rare classic, a quite nice Rickman Godden GR500 sitting alongside Philip McKee's two lovely Wasps. And actually I've only just noticed that Godden GR500 has the name Bar written on the side panel, so maybe I've been speaking out of turn here, and maybe this bike isn't one of Philip's machines, but because number 591 is a rider that's not listed in the race program, I'm unable to verify who the actual owner belongs this GR500. But nevertheless, it's still a lovely trio of old school scramblers to get our part 1 Paddock walkabout video underway. A nice Wasp framed Triumph Twin and a Wasp Westlake, and of course our Rickman GR500 as well. Right, so this was another nice classic that I spotted on the Friday afternoon, and this 1981 YZ465 Yamaha is Eddie Long's chosen steed for the Friday evening's race event. So a very nice example again of probably one of the best YZ Yamaha motocrossers that they ever made, because this bike certainly had it all. Fantastic suspension on the front and at the rear, a very good chassis that was both well designed and very strong, although The cherry on the top of this particular Yamaha cake was that fantastic 465 two-stroke motor, which wasn't as wild and troublesome to set up than its bigger brother, the YZ490, because once you got this 465 all nicely dialed in with regards to the ignition and carb settings, then this motor had usually more than enough grunt to satisfy even your wildest motocross racer. Anyhow, as I'm sure you're already aware, it was a reed valve two-stroke engine that used a 38mm Mikuni carburetor to supply it with its pre-mixed fuel, and the ignition for the spark was by way of a modern electronic CDI discharge system. And you can also see here on Eddie's bike that he's drilled some extra air holes into the airbox just to try and get more air into that engine, although of course the downside to doing that is that more dirt and moisture can also enter the airbox as well. Now, the wet multi-plate clutch on this engine was connected straight onto the crank by way of a helical drive gear, and with regards the gearbox, you had 5 speeds to play tippy-tappy with, so there were plenty cogs inside this engine to keep you busy on the racetrack. But I must say, this YZ465 had very little in the way of vices, because it was a much better behaved engine than its bigger 490 stablemate, which, as you know, did have a bit of a reputation for being a bit fiery and quite difficult to set up, not to mention, of course, the pinking or pre-detonation that it was usually famous for, which is why they then hung that label on the 490 as the old air hammer. And again, you can also see that the YZ's original expansion chambers now been replaced by this much better D and G exhaust pipe, which is only to be expected after 44 years of track action. And what would have been a small mild steel tailpipe here at the rear in 1981, this part's also been upgraded to this quite nice alloy tailpipe that's been supplied by DEP, or Elwell Pipes, if you want their full title. Now, here in the front of Eddie's YZ, it's a pair of 43mm KYB suspension units, which is much the same as these 465s had in 1981, and even in their stock standard trim, these KYBs were excellent, and they did give the rider just under 12 inches of travel here at the front end. And moving on to the back of our 465, it was a single shock that ran from the top of the swing arm right up the backbone of the chassis and underneath the plastic fuel tank. And that single monoshock was connected onto Yamaha's excellent monocross aluminium swing arm, which was certainly another very good feature of this 465. Now, the gas and the oil for that suspension unit was contained in a separate oil and gas storage canister, which was bolted here onto the front of the chassis, where it could be cooled by the on-rushing air when the bike was being ridden on the track. And again, the shock was fully adjustable for rebound and damping. Now, the plastic fuel tank usually held about 2.5 gallons of premix, and that YZ seat was certainly among one of the comfiest that were available for 1981. And up here in the pilot seat, Eddie's bolted on some modern rental bars, a pair of Risk grips, and he's also added a pair of Acerbis handguards there just to stop stones and other flying debris from damaging his knuckles. But all things considered, this 465 is certainly a good example of what was in 1981, without doubt one of the best motocrossers that Yamaha had brought out in that year, and these YZs sold in quite good numbers in the early 80s. And if you return to see all of the racing highlights from the Friday evening's race programme, you'll be able to see Eddie race this bike in the twin shock grade B class. Right, so this was the next bike that I came across on the Friday afternoon, and this is Paul Donaghy's 1981 250 Michael twin shocker, which was also the first one that was being offered up for sale. So if you're maybe in the market for a good clubman's racer, then they don't come any better than one of these 1981 250 Michaels. So what we've got here is the excellent handling of that 81 chassis, and quite good suspension on the front and at the back. But more importantly, we've got that sweet reed valve 250 two-stroke engine, which although was maybe not as powerful as the 400, 440 or maybe even the big 490, it still makes quite a good clubman's racing engine. And I can certainly vouch for the performance of these 250 reed valvers, because I did have one of these engines alongside my bigger 440, and I always found these 250s to be a cracking little motor, just as long as you kept on top of any maintenance issues and inspected those primary chains periodically. Now on this engine, it looks like Paul's swapped the original Bing carburetor for a much more modern Mikuni, which isn't a problem. It's quite common to swap carburetors around on this engine, and if you're looking for a bit of fun at the weekend, then these 250s are just what you need. Now the rear shocks are a pair of RPM piggybacks, which I'm pretty sure are Bill Brown's Wolfsport items, which have certainly got a good reputation for their reliability and their performance. And these RPMs are again fully adjustable for rebound and damping, and they're also fully customizable to the rider's own weight and riding style. And here at the front of Paul's Michael 250, it's the stock standard forks, which for 1981 were pretty decent, and they did work quite well considering their time period. But I've already given Paul a severe reprimand about putting these black wheels on his bike, and he's reassured me that this problem will never happen again. Anyhow, apart from Paul going on a bit of a bender and deciding to fit those black rims, the rest of this 250 is all good and ready to go, and it has everything that you need to get you into twin shock racing and join the other merry bands of weekend classic racers. So if you think that this is maybe something you might be interested in, then just why not give Paul a bell on this number, and hopefully his voice will have healed up by now, because he was a little bit croaky when I met him on the Friday afternoon. But if you want to have a quick listen to what this 250 sounds like, we just managed to catch Paul when he fired the bike up in the paddock. Anyhow, just before we finish this part 1 Paddock walkabout, this is another quite nice bike that Paul was selling on the day. So this is his 1974 Honda CR250 Elsinore, and again, if you're maybe in the market for a little Elsie, then why not just give Paul a bell on that number that we already showed you. So this is certainly a good opportunity for somebody to own a piece of motocross history, because this bike, as you already know, was Honda's first ever fully purpose-built motocrosser. Of course, there were other bikes that had gone before, although those were really just modified road bikes with knobbly tyres. But nevertheless, when Honda drew up their blueprint for this brand new 250 motocrosser, they certainly had done their homework, because every single aspect of this bike was absolutely spot on, and you could certainly win races on this bike by simply removing it from its packing crate, putting fuel in it and taking it to your place on the starting line. But this 250 two-stroke LCA motor was certainly a belter that, as I remember, I think I put out around the 29 horsepower bracket, which I suppose for a small 250 was quite respectable in 1974, and soon after its release, Honda then followed the 250 up with the smaller CR125M, which, as you can imagine, was very popular with the younger riders of that time. And even here in 2025, the baby CR125Ms are still going strong and are as popular as ever, racing in the air-cooled 125 Cup here in the UK, which once again is another very popular racing series for air-cooled 125 vintage twin shockers. Now, I'm not entirely sure if these drums and brakes are the original 74 items, but I do know these black wheels certainly aren't stock, but the bike appears to have most of its Elsinore parts intact, albeit a couple of other little items that have been substituted for much newer parts, which is definitely the case here in the pilot seat, with different bars and grips and levers and cables. That's obviously no less than you'd expect on a 51-year-old dirt bike, especially if it's getting used regularly. Although there's certainly a thriving market for these 250s, and I think even the smaller 125s as well, especially if they're kept in half decent condition, and changing things like putting black rims on one of these iconic racers is never going to add any value to the bike, and usually it might even have the opposite effect if somebody's looking for a used but unmolested example. However, having said that, Paul's certainly added several £100 worth of top quality shocks to his LC, and these Olin units are just about as good as you could probably get when it comes to top quality rear suspensions. So there you go, a couple of quite nice clubman racers to get you into the classic vintage or twin shock racing scene. That's Paul Donaghy's 1981 250 reed valve Michael and his 1974 250 Elsinore that are both currently up for sale. And if you're interested in either bike, then as I said, just give Paul a bell on that number we previously just posted. Anyhow, that just about more or less concludes our first of two Paddock walkabouts from the Friday afternoon's racers, and when we come back we'll be able to show you more of the bikes from around the paddock. But until the next time, It's thanks for watching and cheerio for now.